in video 2306 we made this. It's an orrery. But of course it's more than an orrery, it's also an example of things. One thing it's an example of is what can be done on a laser cutter. But more importantly, it's an example of a mechanism. And as was pointed out by various inventors in the comments on the original video, this mechanism can be used for a whole host of other things besides something like an orrery. And that's exactly what I'm going to do with it. I'm actually going to turn it into a nightlight for the kids. So I turned to Tinkercad and I drew up this. Now, the main change is that the central globe has become a lithophane of the moon, and I didn't create that lithophane. I actually got that from here on Thingiverse, and all credit to that chap who did it, and it's under Creative Commons. I equally didn't create the command module and the lander for the Apollo mission. I grabbed that from here, and again, credit. Equally, I didn't create the feet for this. I got the feet from Thingiverse again, here, and credit to that chap for doing that. But the mechanism of the orrery is the same as the mechanism that I created for this. Now, I turned to Tinkercad and created a 3D printable version of it. And the idea here is we'll be able to light up that lithophane and get a moon-like effect, and be able to have a hands-on experience. So I could have put a motor on it, flip a switch and the thing will just churn around. But I wanted you to have the opportunity of having the light as a nightlight in quiet, and if you wanted to interact with it, if the kids wanted an interaction, they could turn the handle and the space shuttle will fly around the moon, which I thought was very cool. But of course we don't need just to do a moon. If we replace this central globe with, say, something like a pumpkin or a ghost, and if we replace these with things like bats or witches on broomsticks, we'll create ourselves something that could be pretty cool for a Halloween decoration. Or equally something that could be pretty cool for a Christmas decoration or Christmas toy for the kids to play with. And again, it was various inventors who actually noticed that and suggested it. And the reason I'm using things from Thingiverse is because they're available to use. The people who created them are very happy for you to use them, if you give credit, obviously, but they're very happy for you to use them. And I'm very happy for people to use the mechanism to create whatever they want. And it doesn't need to be a challenge to create it. You can basically deal with it as a shopping trip and go through things and find things that you like, bring them together in combination, and create something wholly new for you. Anyway, let's have a look at my moon version on Tinkercad. Okay, let's first remove the decorative elements. Those three things you can replace with anything you want, and what you're left with is the basic mechanism. So the drive mechanism is this handle here, which is connected to a worm gear, which drives that pink cog connected to the orange cog, which is how you drive it. You turn that handle, the turning gets rotated through 90 degrees and then turns that cog in the blue center there. And if we remove that, you can see it's got a pin, a handle, a spacer, there's the pink gear, and finally the worm gear, and we're left with this basic mechanism here. If we remove that drive cog now, then we're left with pretty much the core of the device. Okay, let's remove the feet. Then what we're left with is a bottom plate that supports everything, some columns keeping it apart, and the top plate where those gears are. Let's remove the columns and the bottom plate. The top section has a couple of carrying rods and a rotating arm. If we remove those, then we're left with this bit, which has an orange gear that engages with the big round ring gear, and a central blue gear, which is what rotates the moon, and that was connected to the drive gear. Right, let's remove that drive cog and the central arm, and then we have this, which is the carrier for whatever we want. So I'm going to put the moon on there, but if you have something else, then put something else on there. And in the center you can see this orange pole, that's the light stand. Right, let's put everything back. Right, let's print everything out. Of course, I will put these files on Thingiverse and the link will be in the description. And there's the parts printed out. Now the place to start is with the light stand, and we're going to fix an LED, which is right there. This is COB LED, it's super bright, and I got it from this thing, which is a defunct solar garden light. I'm sure you can buy these on Amazon all by themselves. The other thing you'll need is a thrust bearing. This is 42mm by 25mm by 11mm deep. It will work without the thrust bearing just fine. The thrust bearing just makes it all a little bit smoother, and what I need to do is solder a couple of wires onto the end of my LED, feed them down the centre of the light stand so the LED sits on the top. The wires come out of one of these holes in the bottom, and then it'll come out of that hole there where we connect it to the battery pack. Okay, when you've done that, it goes on the top plate, gluing in the centre like that, and then we can pop the thrust bearing on and put that to one side. Then take the bottom plate, the battery box goes in the recess there, like that. Then the pin goes through here and then through the worm gear. So slide the worm gear into place, push the pin all the way through, and you'll notice on the worm gear there's these holes. Those holes, as you can put some glue to stick the whole thing down, because once you get this in place, you won't be able to stick that in place. So push it through like that, then on the end add the spacer, then glue on and add the handle, and then these uprights with that bit there fit in there with that bit facing upwards, so that it's like that. This one just rests on there, and then we can add the top plate onto there, making sure that lines up with that, so that it's like that. Now the wires, if you can see them, oops, deal with that in a minute. The wires have been led around here and glued into place until they lead out to here to keep everything nice and tidy. You just want some route where it's nice and tidy. This has a big old hole in it right there, just like the worm gear did, because when we drop that in place, we need to be able to put a bit of glue. So put that in where it's supposed to go right there against the worm gear with the hole facing out. And then this gear with the long spindle goes in there like that, and we're going to go into a hole in that section. Then we need to put a spot of glue in there to make sure that this turns when this does, but it's free to turn. Then we can put on the feet so that it's like that. Now we can put it to one side for a moment. And we need this with that bar facing upwards, this gear with the hole in the centre, which goes through there like that, and then that arm, which goes on top of there like that and gets glued into place. And we have these two sticks. The long stick goes in that hole there, and, oh, my bad, wrong way around. The short stick goes in that hole there, and the long stick goes in that one there. Like that, so that it's free to turn. And then this whole assembly drops in here. So it's like that. Now when we turn the handle, what will happen is this will move around, that will rotate around that, and that centre will rotate. And that's the mechanism actually finished. What we stick on there is now up to us. And the only other thing we have to do is wire these two wires together, and there's a switch on this battery box. When we turn it on, that light comes on. And then there are some zip ties to hold the wires neatly. Now the bits that go on it. In my case, I'm going to use these bits, which is the command shuttle and the lander from the Apollo missions. And the command shuttle goes on the small one, and the lander goes on the big one, and there's a little hole in it for it. There we go, like that. Don't glue those into place. If you don't glue those into place, then you can always swap them over, like we were saying before, for bats, witches, ghosts, whatever it is you want. The central column has this ring here. This ring fits neatly over there and into that space for it. But on top of that ring is what you fit for the other things that you want. And there's my moon globe. So I'm going to glue that onto that moon globe. But if you use a pumpkin, you would do exactly the same thing. That then can be swapped over and we get a multi-use device. But let's glue that on and pop it on and have a look at it. And that's it with that LED light switched on. Now, I'm not sure how well you're seeing the moon, but the moon surface comes out really well. And of course, if I then turn this handle, what happens is the moon spins, and as the moon spins, the Apollo lander tries to dock with the Apollo mission. I thought that was so cool. But if you don't want or the kids don't want to interact with it, then all they have to do is leave it alone, and it's a nightlight with a spaceship round it. So these might look very different, but the mechanisms are identical. We've just done something slightly different with that, which I think is awesome. So in the spirit of Halloween, we can take the moon off, and I've also got this ghost, and if we turn the light on, we've got a ghost nightlight. And of course we can change those over, because remember, those aren't glued, so something more appropriate to a ghost. And finally, in the spirit of Halloween, a jack-o'-lantern. With the main lights out, there's our jack-o'-lantern. There's our ghost. And finally, back to what I really like, the moon. And again, remember, these do spin around if you want the kids to actually interact with it, but a pretty cool Nightlight. So I have included these STL files, but you can do whatever you like. So in spirit of Christmas, do some Christmas things. Halloween things. For presents for your kids, do something you think the kids would actually like. But it's all based on that same mechanism that we first looked at here. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. And please do remember to like and subscribe.